Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Ailsa Kepi and you can find out more about me either on my coaching website pleasureforhealth.com or at my retreat center website ourceltichearth.com. So today I wanted to talk to you just about something I've been thinking about. I deal a lot with trauma victims, people that have had abuse, and these types of patterns that show up in our lives, in our relationships because of this. And, I was considering that in our world today, I live in Canada, that actually we are going through a collective trauma at the moment. And I know that's not news to many of you who are, involved on the media at any, in any way. Lots of us are noticing that we are collectively going through this pandemic, and it's traumatizing many people, if not all of us, on a global scale. But what I wanted to look at was how this was coming up almost in response to, in Canada, a previous trauma or a very recent trauma sort of going along at the same time as this trauma. And that is that we recently began to really look at the history of residential schools in Canada. This was where Indigenous children were sent to unlearn their own culture and to be integrated into white culture. And we had a couple of incidences of finding mass grave sites of these children, that many of them had been killed or left to die or not being cared for adequately. And so there was a kind of a trauma collectively you could feel in the population here regarding this history, this historical fact that could no longer be kind of overlooked in our colonial empire. And, we had to kind of face this in ourselves. And it's interesting to notice that when faced with overwhelming experiences emotionally, often we will revert to our previous childhood patterns, let's say, for dealing with overwhelming experiences. And for, this was kind of uncovering the wound, and many people responded by, I think, kind of collectively being traumatized and being thrown into our own overwhelm, a traumatic response, so that our nervous system was sent back to wherever in our past we had different woundings around this, around abuse or around neglect or around, childhood trauma ourselves. And so it's interesting that the pandemic then, was happening kind of concurrently or just after that. And when someone is in a trauma response, they're not actually able to cognitively process in their cerebral cortex, our thinking brain, about what's really happening. We just tend to react from our reptilian or mammalian parts of our brain, our lower brain aspects, which helps us act quickly but doesn't help us think about how we're acting. And so many of us were just rolling into restrictions and following what we were told very quickly in the current circumstances. Whatever the government said, we almost look, government has been seen as the archetypal parents in a way. We look to government to look after us, to guide us. So in a way, when the government then says do this or do that, we were already in shock and sent, kind of in a childhood trauma fixation from, I believe, a lot from, sort of sensing the underpinnings of our society are based on these types of abuses to the Indigenous people here. And because of our lack of being able to process this, we were kind of thrown into that trauma child response, and then very susceptible to being told what to do because we're not actually in our thinking brain at this point. And so that's our adaptation, is to, just go along with. And I think many of us have gone along with what we've been told to do then, And it's kind of strange when you look around going, wow, these are all grown people just following orders and not thinking or not questioning or not even, having an adult sense of discernment around what we should or shouldn't do. We're just kind of blindly following. And why is that? So this was my kind of overlay, was that perhaps there's some of this there. And this might just be my experience, but if it resonates for you, maybe there's something here for you to consider, in the fact that we're letting go of many rights and freedoms just by kind of rolling with what we're being told to do in this kind of frozen state of shock and trauma. And even just the pandemic itself, having this really dangerous disease out there, perhaps not, but something that threatens our survival, that we may be abandoned, that we may be left behind. All of those fears that our inner child is trying to protect us from. And so then, not coming to the table with our adult brain online is a dangerous place, because we're not actually, questioning and thinking and being rational, actually. So, what does it take? What does it take to get out of this mob mentality, this kind of, going along without thinking kind of mentality? And what it actually requires is a mystical medicine, like a shamanic kind of medicine, whatever term you want to put to that. We aren't going to solve the problem at the level that it's at on this plane, in this dimension, but to go back to our wounded child, where we felt coerced, or where we felt abandoned, neglected, all of those things. Where can we look at that in ourselves? Where did we feel like we were the perpetrator, even in our own selves, in our own communities? How do we kind of go back and look at that relationship of, colonial powers, and how could we look at, there's hundreds, perhaps thousands of children that were killed, neglected, allowed to die, taken away from their culture. Where have we abandoned ourselves? And in doing so, let ourselves forget that we're going through our own traumas with that, and how can we heal that? So we need to heal it in our own bodies, in our own selves. This is the work that we need to do. Doing this kind of shamanic, mystical, archetypal work can be something that is helpful to have a guide or a mentor or a coach or a group or people that you have to do this with. So, I highly recommend, looking for a mentor or a guide or a group of people with whom you can do this deep dive work with, that you feel safe with, that you can bring up these types of questions, not to just berate our parental government figures, but to actually go deeper and say, what were we avoiding in ourselves by just following orders? What are we avoiding, holding and parenting in ourselves? So we want to empower that victim side of ourselves to actually stand up and, be responsible and hold us accountable to not just getting ourselves in another victimizing or victimhood position, which we may very well find ourselves in if we continue to go along with everything we're told. We may at some point wake up and notice that we have been victimized yet again, that we have rolled over and not noticed, and now we're replaying that pattern over and over again. So the healing is possible. We have to really go inwards and do it almost on a different plane. And if you're interested in this type of work, reach out to me. Maybe perhaps we'll create a small group of people that are interested in this type of work to kind of help each other move forward with this. It would interest me. I know we are creating a center here in Nova Scotia, our Celtic Hearth, which will be a gathering place for these types of thoughts, these types of circles, these types of gatherings, these types of mystical healing options that are going to help us to really, help our child to actually grow up and take responsibility. If you're interested in just these kind of survival archetypes that we do need to transcend if we're going to move towards more of a spiritual awakening type of community, I do have an online course called Radical Responsibility, The Power of Choice. And you can find that on my website, pleasureforhealth.com. And I'd be happy to have you take that course, reach out to me. Let's help each other to come out of this trauma response, to face what is there to be faced, to feel what is there to be felt, and to really move towards a real spiritual awakening in the coming months and years and decades that we hopefully have to contribute to this universe, this world that we live in, and to our coming generations. If that interests you, feel free to make a comment, follow my channel, reach out to me, see what else is going on. I have lots of things happening, usually in different areas, so please reach out and check out my website. I also have a book, a memoir out recently, so if you're interested in my own journey from victim to victorious, you can check out By the Light of the Crescent Moon. It's available on Amazon, Indigo Chapters, Barnes & Noble, all the usual places. And I'd love to have your feedback on that too. So hope you enjoyed my thoughts for today. Maybe that made you think about things a little bit differently. And I look forward to talking with you soon.